This week, we're going to take a look at how Jesus teaches us how to pray. Now, we're going to be looking at the Matthew passage in the beginning of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and we discussed a little bit from the end of the Sermon on the Mount last week. But this week, we're going to look at Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 through 13, when we look at how Jesus models prayer for us. Now, I want to make some distinctions between Matthew's passage and Luke's passage. Now, Luke, in his passage, the disciples have come and asked Jesus, teach us how to pray, and Jesus goes into what we have commonly called the Lord's Prayer. But in Matthew, it's actually in his message at the Sermon on the Mount, and he's actually contrasting, this is how you should pray, versus how the hypocrites, mainly the pagans, and specifically probably more towards the teachers of the law, this is how they pray. And Jesus is contrasting, saying, don't pray like they do. Instead, go into a quiet place, and this is how you should pray. And so we're going to look at the parts of prayer real quickly. So let me read this passage. This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Now, Luke's going to have a little bit more to that, but this is where Matthew ends right here. So there's a couple of different parts of prayer that I want us to see as we continue to teach our preteens. First thing is that we have this introduction, this praise or adoration that we have. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. There's two things we can see from this. First of all, Jesus is telling us it's a very clear distinction that God is somewhere altogether different. He's in heaven, which means he's not like us. He's different than us. We call this in Christian terminology, of course, him being holy, right? His transcendence. He's altogether different than us. But then we also see this idea of hallowed be your name. And he's declaring that holy is your name. You are different. You are sacred. You are above and beyond and outside of us as human beings, right? Then we go into this part where it says, your kingdom come and your will be done. Jesus beautifully and wonderfully is saying, it's not about what I want in prayer, but God, it's about what you want in prayer. In other words, the idea of prayer is not for us to come and give our list of demands and expectations of God, but for us to submit our hearts underneath him and what he wants for us. And oftentimes whenever we become more deeper in prayer, we realize this is what happens. We'll be praying about something in particular, and God begins to change our heart and our mind. In the middle of that prayer, he brings something to our hearts. So then he says, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Again, this idea that we want what you want, God, not what we want. Then he goes into a part of asking, and we're going to kind of break this apart for the students as well, but he goes into this part of asking, give us today our daily bread. In other words, not the things that I want, but the things that I need as provision today. And of course, this is automatically supposed to make us think of the Old Testament as the people of God are wandering in the wilderness and that manna from heaven that God provided on a daily basis. And if they collected too much, of course, they got maggots and it was disgusting to eat. And this is what's supposed to come to our minds is, I only need for today, God, what you need to give me today. I don't want any more or any less. Just give me what I need for today. Then there's a really powerful statement, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. I think this is a really important part of this passage. Jesus is saying, I come and I confess what I've done wrong. I admit my sin, I admit my wrong, but another part of that is that I also am forgiving those who have offended and hurt me. Just the same way that I offend God, others have offended me, and I need to be forgiving them as I also am being forgiven. To have a relationship with God means that you understand God's mercy over your own life and what Christ has done for us. And therefore, we in the same way give mercy and forgiveness to other people. And then this last part, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. A recognition that we're going to be tempted. That temptation is going to happen, but we want God to show us the way out from that temptation, which a later passage talks about in the New Testament, where it says, God hasn't allowed you to be tempted beyond what you can bear, but he provides a way out for you even in the midst of that temptation. So these are some incredible principles to talk about. So we have the idea of praise, We have the idea of confession and repentance. We have the idea of God asking for the things that we need of him. And then we also have this last part where we kind of throughout the whole prayer, God, what you want, I'm yielding to what you want, not what I want. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts from this passage and specifically about prayer when you think about Jesus modeling prayer for us. So send them back to me.